dear Kishore ji, and I think I can start my presentation, no?
Yes, yes, absolutely, sir. Please.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be sharing my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible, sir.
Okay, so I'll go ahead. Actually, I'm planning to talk something about a special area of research, which may be, as Kishorji told, considered as a sort of an educational research. And I'll be talking about how to reinvent the Ayurvedic clinical methods. That is actually what I'm going to talk about. If we look around, interestingly, it can be seen that Ayurveda is more widely used to treat many complex diseases which are otherwise incurable. That is an emerging trend everywhere. But the capacity of Ayurveda to diagnose is always underrated. Ayurveda is seen, appreciated in many ways. There are many attitudes about Ayurveda. Something like it is a raw collection of information. There is a huge treasure of medicinal plants in it. And it is a stream of rustic practices which can be refined, but which has no logical foundation. I have heard expert speakers broadcasting from various platforms that Ayurvedic diagnosis, diagnostic, actually not Ayurvedic diagnosis, the diagnosis in Ayurveda is a big zero. So it seems to be quite paradoxical that we treat but do not diagnose. So there are many questions. How is this happening actually? Do the Vaidyas really diagnose a disease in an Ayurvedic way or treat it without diagnosing? Or they diagnose using some other tools? Is there a clinical method in Ayurveda? Is there an Ayurvedic diagnostic practice possible other than the ritualistic and inefficient record book method of the subject, Roga Vijnana evam Vikriti Vijnana, that we follow these days as our fundamental practice in clinical training? So these are some very basic questions. And I think we need to have an in-depth research, whatever the name be, let it be an educational research or something else, for reinventing the Ayurvedic clinical methods. Because it has become the most essential stuff today to take Ayurveda forward. Fine. Then any Shastra will have two components in it. One theory and the other component is the practice or application. It is unique learning method and its teaching method is very important. As far as any Shastra is concerned, any system is concerned, the practice is the natural evolution of the theory in relation to the Desha and Kala. As far as Ayurveda is concerned, definitely its clinical application is the natural evolution of its theoretical acumen. Generally, there should not be any conflict, but it can happen. As I told earlier, within this limits of Desha and Kala, there may be conflicts. Then in such situations, if at all there is a conflict, the theory is tested again and again, the application is repeated again and again, and revisions are made accordingly. And this seems to be a very continuous process. Now, there is a question, if this is to happen in this exercise, there should be a methodology, which is very important. So another question that pops up is, does Ayurveda has a methodology to do this exercise? Answer is yes. That methodology is based on Nyaya Shastra, which is also known as maybe Hedu Shastra or Hedu Vidya, Tarka Shastra or Anvikshiki. While we follow this methodology, one of the major components that we meet with is Anumana, which of course incorporates Yukti as well as one of the three pramanas in Ayurvedic methodology of inquiry, which it has assimilated from Nyaya Shastra. Everyone knows that Anumana is of prime importance in Ayurveda. There is no compromise in it. There is no doubt about it. Anumana actually is the way in which one makes an Anumana in a specific premise. Here in Ayurveda, that should suit to the premise. That is very important. Anumana in a specific premise should suit to that premise. Otherwise, it is going to be futile, waste. Anumanam is always pratyaksha purvaka. So, the way in which pratyaksha, the direct sensory perception happens, is going to decide how valid one's Anumana is. What is known to you, that is going to decide what you can perceive and comprehend. That is very important. This known factor which decides what you can perceive or comprehend is contributed by another pramana called Aptopadesha. So if you have to gain knowledge about a prameya with pratyaksha pramana, whatever it is, you should have a pre-acquired knowledge about that prameya, and Aptopadesha provides you with that knowledge. So that is the importance of Aptopadesha. And basically, when we come to the clinical training part of Ayurveda, we should have some sort of an introspection, because doshas are supposed to be the basic aim of inquiry in the clinical training. It is meant to understand doshas with all possible descriptive inputs. Both the Roga Pariksha and Rogi Pariksha are conducted with the basic aim of understanding the dosha involvement with its full spectrum of associations and attachments. That way, dosha can be considered as the most basic prameya in Ayurveda. All other factors, dosha, dushya, desha, kala, bala, all these things, which Kishorji was also mentioning in his presentation, they are all used to understand doshas in full. And these doshas are understood in terms of their lakshana and karma in the complete paraphernalia, both prakrita and vikrita, using aptopadesha. This we should have and achieved in advance. So actually, a learner should gain knowledge about all these aspects in pratyaksha, in prakriti as well as vikriti. The learner should have perceived it by pratyaksha. There are many things: chaya, prakopa, the moolasthana, the gojarasthana, the roga marga, influence of the nidana on the doshas, then the way in which they are dispersed, getting the sthana samshraya, the roga ulpatti. All these things are primarily understood on the basis of aptopadesha, and then we have to move to the next level, that is pratyaksha. The pratyaksha jnana, which is registered as some sort of a knowledge in our buddhi, is further used to move forward in the path of inquiry, using logical reasoning and gaining inferential knowledge called anumana. This is a standard way. Wherever it is common to all streams. But this method in which one makes anumana in a specific premise should suit to that premise, which I told earlier. If that is to happen, the pratyaksha and the aptopadesha should fit into that same premises. And the inputs from each level should complement one another. Very, very important. So this is that sequence what we see: aptopadesha, seeing, putting it into the direct level of perception, pratyaksha, then moving forward with inferential knowledge called anumana. Even though this is applicable to any stream, as I told earlier, each level is unique to each stream. That is important. Each level is so unique. The validity of anumana, logical reasoning, is directly dependent upon the hedu what we use, reason. One among the 5 components of anumana. I hope everybody knows it. The others being pratigna, udaharana, upanaya, and nigamana. Seeking the right hedu is always important. And this inquiry or search for hedu should again be suitable to the basic premises of the system. In order to draw valid anumana, the seeking of the right hedu is becoming really important. So coming to Ayurvedic learning, even though the concept of dosha introduced through aptopadesha sticks on to the Ayurvedic premises, in the next level, that means in the level of pratyaksha, there are issues. In majority of the situations in clinical training, the trainers fail to make the concept of dosha realistic, experiential, or sensual to the students. Instead, the instructional strategy and techniques slip away from the Ayurvedic premises and resort on to those of the Western medicine. Here, the trainer ends up or tends to make weak and irrational comparisons of technical terms and definitions, intending to make them more convincing, resounding, or scientific. Again, this ends up in some sort of a contamination of knowledge, generating asat or asatnyanam or aprama. This is not a deliberate effort, but this is what is happening. The student, the result is that the student does not see or perceive what he or she is supposed to, because the pratyaksha jnanam is not happening in the right premises of Ayurvedic learning. This is what is happening. And the knowledge generated out of this exercise is not becoming Ayurvedic. This is how we slowly missed our real clinical method. Obviously, this is going to reflect in both Prakriti Jnana as well as Vikriti Jnana. When one person registers some sort of a knowledge he or she gained by one method of Pratyaksha, his or her act of imagination, capacity to use logical reasoning to find valid hetu in the act of applying Anumana Pramana will be directly driven by the registered knowledge. So that is how, where we lack some sort of an integrity of understanding, and that is how we end up in generating knowledge which cannot be anymore mentioned as Ayurvedic. This has become the normal in our academies today, especially so in the undergraduate academies where our Vaidyas are groomed. And as this has become so normal, so natural and so spontaneous, we don't even understand that this is what is going on. One step down, if we go one step down, this root can be seen. Sorry for that. I think there is some problem with the, just 1 minute. Yeah, the roots can be seen back in one step down, and where we teach Shariram. Shariram in general, and especially Kriya Shariram, I think the premises in which these subjects are taught has changed over a period of time, quite extemporaneously, quite smoothly. Shariram is not instructed in the Ayurvedic premises these days. Instead, it is done in the Western backdrop. Direct and indirect cues are aired in the classrooms. That Shariram is a primitive documentation of some anatomy and physiology that the Indians had in the ancient times. Shariram is an important bridge between the fundamental principles of the Shastra and its clinical methods, and it should be taught in that way. This is very, very important. Now, how to overcome this crisis? We need research to reinvent the original clinical methods of Ayurveda. For that, we have to work on how to incorporate the right method of using the three pramanas, especially more so with Anumana. Rediscovering the Ayurvedic premises, first in the instructional practices of Sharira, that is the Prakriti Pariksha, not in the sense that the dosha Prakriti, but the normal, and subsequently at the level of the Roga Rogi Pariksha, that is Vikriti Pariksha, could be the most essential part where experiments are to be conducted. I don't find any other way out in this regard. So what could be the first step? We have to invest more and more time and effort in learning the concepts of Nyaya Shastra in the formative period of a Vaidya, and I think that that should be started at least on an experimental basis with immediate priority, and that could be the best way out, at least in due course of time, to make a substantial change in the way in which Ayurvedic Vaidyas think about Vyadhi. So I think that is a core concept that I would like to convey in this presentation. Thank you very much.